This is Gala Avery reporting to you from inside the Video Archive Cinema Club, the 20-seat secret cinema located within the Vista. Today, I am joined by Video Archive Cinema Club manager Matt Landsman to chat about the calendar for the week of Monday, December 2nd. Hey, Matt.
Welcome to December, Gala.
I'm so happy to be here because December is my favorite month of the year. So yeah, it's December and the Cinema Club is still working on our full calendar, but as soon as it's out, Matt and I will discuss the overall theme of the month and the design. And I'm really excited to see what color this calendar ends up being. No spoilers, but
there may be spoilers.
There may be spoilers, especially this week. I wanted to highlight one difference this week, which there are no midnights and the Cinema Club is closed on Thursday because of an event at the Vista.
That is correct. So we're going to kick off the week with a movie that is set at Christmas time, which I thought was befitting. And that is The Thin Man from 1934.
And that plays on Tuesday the 3rd at 2 p.m.
So there were a few different reasons that I wanted to program this one, which is the only one that I programmed for the week. And part of that is because it kind of reminds me of Fast Company, which Quentin mentioned on the show last week. And also because, like I said, it's a Christmas set movie. There's a great scene at a Christmas party where they're popping little balloons off a Christmas tree with a pellet gun. And another reason I wanted to play this movie was in connection to Remember Last Night, which I will get to when we talk about Remember Last Night, which is the final movie of the week. So in this story, you have William Powell, who's really great in My Man Godfrey and also appears in the silent version of Beau Geste, playing opposite Myrna Loy as Nick and Nora Charles. And they're basically this wealthy society couple who's investigating a murder just because they can. And kind of like Fast Company and Bulldog Drummond stuff to a lesser extent, and even a little bit in Remember Last Night, this kind of just seems to be a thing that rich people did back then.
And still now, today.
Yeah, they investigate murders for fun. So he's coming back to the New York scene as a former detective with his new wife and their dog, and he's bringing his wife into this world of unsavory characters, and they start to just solve a murder because it's great fun for them. And it's worth highlighting that the dog, Asta, who's played by Skippy, is the name of the dog, is a famous movie dog. Maybe one of the greatest movie dogs of all time. And this dog became so iconic in that role that people started to think that Skippy's actual name was Asta. And he shows up in Topper Takes a Trip, and It's a Small World, and a ton of other stuff. But what's really wild about this is that this same dog and those two actors, Myrna Loy and William Powell, were in all Thin Man movies. The same dog, the same leads. And apparently this dog had like military training standards. Like they weren't allowed to talk to him between takes. They would like squeak a squeaky toy and hold up a biscuit, and he would just perform.
And from Quentin's library, we have an Thin Man lobby card, which will be on display when the movie's playing. I like that they've subtitled it, "It's Urgent, Nick. They've killed him," which just kind of sends you right into what the movie's all about. It's about solving a murder. And of course, they're going to figure out, the rich people are going to figure it out.
I love that theme, sort of, that we're playing with of gentlemen, amateur sleuths having fun and solving murders
like
together.
High society is so bored that what else do they have to do than solve a murder?
Yeah, it's awesome. So just to be clear, William Powell is not the Thin Man. The Thin Man is the guy that Nick Charles is hired to find, but William Powell became so synonymous with this movie, and he played the character so many times of Nick that people were thinking he was the Thin Man, and the name just sort of stuck, even though there is no Thin Man that they're trying to find in a lot of the sequels. And W.S. Van Dyke, the director, did 4 of the Thin Man movies. He wanted the husband and wife screenwriting duo of Albert Hackett and Francis Goodrich to concentrate on the witty banter between Nick and Nora and not really focus on the detective drama from the original novel this was based on. And from what I understand, he was a real actor's director. He focused on just letting these natural performances come across out of everyone, and the actors really loved working with him. And it comes across on screen because the banter here is really funny. What we haven't touched on yet is that William Powell and Myrna Loy have incredible on-screen chemistry together, and they're just really funny in this. And this is a plucky little mystery movie that spawned an entire franchise at a time when it was really rare, and it still is rare, to see these characters played by the same actors across this many movies. So we just thought it was a great way to ring in the season, and it's paired really nicely with some other stuff that we're playing later in the week.
So, as far as I can tell, relating to the dog, because now I'm obsessed with Skippy and Asta Jr. Skippy played Asta in the first four. So, the Thin Man, After the Thin Man, Another Thin Man, and Shadow of the Thin Man. And then a little puppy named Asta Jr. takes over for The Thin Man Goes Home and Song of the Thin Man. Hey, Matt, I think it is time for a snack break.
Let's all go to the lobby.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
And we're back. And Matt, looks like you have some great snacks there.
I actually ran into our friend David Chen in the lobby,
Who is one of the lead projectionists at the New Beverly and a dear, dear friend of mine.
who is the one projecting the spoilers, 1930.
Yes, he is. At least I know the Monday show. Is he also projecting Tuesday?
I don't know.
Well, I know he's projecting Monday for sure.
Well, we love David, so we had to ask him what his favorite snacks are from Pam's Coffee.
And what did he say?
He said a black mamba and a slice of cherry pie.
God, that is so David. If you're wondering his Finney's order, he gets the egg, I think it's the bacon egg burger sub a buffalo patty with truffle fries.
Being friends with Gala means that you get to be witness to her superpower of remembering everyone's birthdays and what they order for food at restaurants.
And now I know what David orders for his snack when he comes to the Cinema Club: a black mamba and a slice of cherry pie. Now, moving on to Wednesday the 4th at 2 p.m., we are playing the Spoilers 1942's version.
This is Spoilers Week, and there are 5 versions of the Spoilers in total, of which you can see 3 of them this week between the New Bev and the Vista. And they're all based on a best-selling novel by Rex Beach, which was written in 1906. So first there was a 1914 silent version, and then a 23 silent version directed by Lambert Hillier, who directed Dracula's Daughter, which is going to come up again on this show. Stay tuned. And it's based on the actual events of the Nome Gold Rush, which was a major gold rush where a lot of people made a lot of money, which Rex Beach himself was somewhat present for, as I understand, between 1899 and 1909. And basically, this deals with a thing called claim jumping. And claim jumping is filing claims on a territory where gold has already been found. So someone illegally taking over another person's land claim for the mining rights. Ray Enright directed this, and he did a lot of westerns, including Coroner Creek, which you might see at the very least a trailer for in the coming days, since it features Sally Eilers,
who we are heavily featuring this month at the Cinema Club.
Universal borrowed Ray Enright from WB to contract him to do this film. But what makes this version of it stand out, in my opinion, is the cast. The cast in this version is fantastic. You have Marlene Dietrich as Cherry Malotte. You have John Wayne as Roy Glenister. You have Margaret Lindsay, who we're seeing in A Tragedy at Midnight, as Helen. And you have Randolph Scott as McNamara, the Gold Commissioner politician.
So, Matt, I know that you will be seeing the Spoilers version that is playing at the New Bev on Monday and Tuesday. But out of the ones that you've seen, is this one your favorite?
So far, having seen the 42 version and the 55 version, this is my preferred version. And it's really because of the cast. I think that John Wayne just has this incredible swagger, this incredible gravitas. Obviously, Quentin talked about how great Margaret Lindsay was as an actress on last week's episode, but there's a really cool change up in this movie. So basically, Cherry Malotte, Marlene Dietrich's character, who is this sort of saloon boss, goes to the Gold Commissioner, played by Randolph Scott, McNamara, asking for help on settling a claim dispute. And when you have your lead actress going to a sort of male governmental authority figure asking for help, and he's a charming, attractive man, he's smiling and he's nice, then that sort of paints the idea in your head that this is the male lead of the movie. And then John Wayne comes on a ship coming back into town to get a hold of his mine, which he's co-running with his buddy Dex, who's played by Harry Carey, who's really funny in this. And John Wayne comes into town with Margaret Lindsay. And immediately you're kind of like, is this guy philandering? Is, he not the romantic partner on screen to Marlene Dietrich's character? And she's really rough around the edges with him because she's pissed off that he's showing up with another woman when she was waiting for him to come back into town. So John Wayne comes in, is a bit of a scoundrel, and you're not, at least for me, not being familiar with this source material prior, sure who is the hero in this version of the story. And over the course of the story, as the machinations start to play out, you realize that it is the government guy, the Gold Commissioner, McNamara, Randolph Scott, who is a diabolical villain in this movie, and that it's, of course, John Wayne as Glenister who's the hero, because I'm guessing in all versions of the story and in the novel, they have this gold claim, and a judge calls Glenister and his business partner Dex's claim into question and makes them go to court to sort of straighten out whose claim it is. And they agree to go to court because they want to be law upstanding guys. And the court throws the case for 90 days. And in that 90 days, because the judge is corrupt and he's in cahoots with McNamara, Randolph Scott, they're going to steal John Wayne's claim. And so what ends up happening is there's money at stake, there's justice at stake over whose claim it is, and they both have designs on Cherry Malotte. So it's building and building to an incredibly violent fisticuffs climax. And there's this great line in both versions that I've seen where Glenister comes in the room as McNamara is sort of trying to force himself on Cherry Malotte, and he's saying, "You have a bad habit of claim jumping," which in this case has a double meaning like he's taking his girl also. So there's an explosive fight scene, which I think is a hallmark of all versions.
Yeah, I think they usually say it's like that last reel.
Yeah.
The entire last reel is the fight. One thing is, I think that this might also end up being, once I've seen all of them, my favorite of the spoilers, because man, I love Randolph Scott. Anyone who knows me loves I love a Bud Buddaker Western, and he stars in some of my favorite of the Bud Buddaker Westerns. Specifically, my favorite of his would be Comanche Station.
And apparently, this was the only movie where he played like an outright villain. So
Yeah.
you may find that interesting too.
I think I probably would, and especially because this is 1942, so it's kind of before all of the Bud Buddaker Westerns I've seen of him. And typically I find that in Westerns, someone plays a goody, and then they become a bad guy, and then they play a bad guy for the rest of their career. I think it's kind of rare to have someone play a bad guy and then turn into a good guy later in their life.
Well, and like I said, it's super interesting because he sort of enters this movie as a good guy, to the extent that I thought he was the good guy. And then he gets increasingly diabolical as his plan is laid bare throughout the course of the movie. And the fight is a hair shy of 4 minutes long in this version. They punch each other through a window. The spectators in this bar are getting like so riled up that they're like starting to punch each other. Apparently this fight took 5 days to capture and used 15 cameras. So we're all going to be kind of playing along, doing a compare and contrast on the different fight scenes. And this one's pretty violent. They really beat the shit out of each other, and it's pretty awesome to watch.
This version of the spoilers, which is 1942, directed by Ray Enright, starring Marlene Dietrich, Randolph Scott, and John Wayne, plays on Wednesday the 4th at 2 p.m. If you want to continue the theme of the spoilers this week, you can also head on down Friday the 6th at 7 p.m. to see the 1955 version of the spoilers.
So the 55 version is in color, and it's in those bright, bold Technicolor stylizations. It's directed by Jesse Hibbs. It has the classic Bud Westmore Universal makeup credit, and it's very similar to that version that we just described. A lot of these same plot machinations happen. In fact, the way his partner Dex reacts to being taken to court is sort of the main plot difference that I could find as I was watching them.
And Dex is played by John McIntyre in this.
So weirdly, despite being much newer than the 1942 version, this version is also really hard to see. Not impossible, like the 1930 version, which you can only see at the New Beverly this week. But this version is pretty rare. Physical copies of it aren't on eBay right now. It's not on any legal means of streaming. So this one is one that if you're interested in just sort of continuing the journey through the Rex Beach adaptations of the spoilers, you might want to check this one out Friday with us at Video Archive Cinema Club. And what's different about this version is you have Anne Baxter as Cherry Malotte, and she's much more of a people pleaser. She's a little bit more approachable than Dietrich. She does this thing repeatedly where she slides down the banister and she's just delighting the masses, glad handing everyone. She even sings at one point in this. And then you have Silver Fox, Jeff Chandler as Glenister in this version, who's probably best known for Broken Arrow. Rory Calhoun, who is probably best known at this point for a horror movie that I really love called Motel Hell, but it was also in a lot of Westerns. He plays McNamara, the Gold Commissioner.
And we also can't forget that he's in How to Marry a Millionaire. That's the role that I would, as a lady, would know him from.
That's the gala pick.
That's the gala pick, would be How to Marry a Millionaire.
So everything about this version to me was just a little bit softer and nicer. And it has the trappings of a 50s movie. Jeff Chandler doesn't really have the grit of John Wayne, and Anne Baxter doesn't really have the grit of Marlene Dietrich. And Rory Calhoun is a bit less sinister of a villain. So it's all the same things happening, but it just doesn't have that really tough sort of brutal edge to it that the 1942 version has. And the fight scene clocks in about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And this version of the fight scene is really slapstick. They are basically destroying the set in this version. They're crashing through windows. They're tearing down the banister. They're flipping over card tables. It's a pretty slapstick, maybe lighter take on the fight. I noticed in the 42 version, their shirts are getting all ripped up. There's blood on their faces. You can really hear the impact hits. In this version, they're kind of playing this jaunty saloon music throughout the fight, and it's much shorter and just a bit friendlier feeling of a movie as a whole.
We have a lobby card from the 1955 version of the spoilers. And let me just tell you, okay, yeah, I love Eastman and I love an Eastman Western, but you can tell that this is on Technicolor. And even the still that they've pulled, it's a beautifully recreated, painted look of it. Make sure that when you come and see the movie that you come and also check out the lobby card because it is really beautiful. I just love the coloring in that.
Rory Calhoun is wearing this blue suit in the movie that's very Dorothy's dress, Wizard of Oz level of Technicolor. So if you like him, then you'll definitely want to check out that version. Another thing I'll say about the spoilers, in both versions I saw, this might end up being a gala movie because there's some train action.
Of course
in this
there
movie.
is. Of course there is. Every Western must have a train. That's just the important thing about it. Once I've seen all three versions, I will report back and say which one my favorite is. But you do have lots and lots of opportunities to make this a spoilers week because on Monday the 2nd and Tuesday the 3rd at the New Bev, there are showings of the Spoilers 1930s version. And then, of course, on Wednesday, we have the Spoilers 1942. And on Friday evening, we have the Spoilers 1955. So you really can do a whole Spoilers retrospective this week.
I think it's the 42 version that is perhaps best known to the world and easiest to see. And that's probably because of the star power of John Wayne and Marlene Dietrich. But I am really, really excited and curious to see the 1930 version because no one alive has ever seen it before. And you can hear Quentin talk about it on the last episode, but that's going to be a real treat.
Okay, so wrapping up the week, our final showing is a double feature, and it is our first Sally Eilers double feature of the month. On Saturday, December 7th at 7 p.m., we have Bad Girl with co-hit Remember Last Night.
So I know that Quentin is a big fan of Sally Eilers, and he's probably going to have a lot more to say about her and her history.
And I think we may or may not have a special guest on next week to elaborate a little bit better.
This was her 16th talkie, Bad Girl, and it was a career breakthrough for her. Prior to this, she was actually known as the filthiest language in Hollywood for her appearance in Buster Keaton movies. And after this, she was averaging 4 movies a year. So we're showcasing a big star of that era. And this was the movie that really put her on the map. And it's a pre-code talkie with Sally Eilers and James Dunn. It's the first of 6 movies which they were going to do together. And prior to this, they were both sort of unknown. This movie, right from the first scene, kind of throws you for a loop because she's getting dolled up in a wedding dress and you think she's about to step out into her wedding. And then this surreal thing happens where she walks out dressed as a bride to the Here Comes the Bride song. And all these guys at these tables start hitting on her. And you realize it's not her wedding, but that she's a store model trying on these dresses and walking around. And anytime, her boss or any of these guys hit on her, she tells them that her boyfriend is a prize fighter to kind of back them down. So she goes on the ferry to Coney Island, and then she meets this guy played by James Dunn, who's named Eddie. And this is a guy that she kind of can't easily seduce. She's used to being the girl that everybody wants. And he's this sort of working class guy who has his dream of opening his own radio store. And he's an amazing character. He talks about how he struggles with words and he kind of is always, in the modern sense, you would say nagging women. He's
a male pickup artist.
But he has a heart of gold. And they fall for each other, and it's legitimately very sweet. And I found his character really relatable because, sometimes it's just like hard to be like earnest and tell people what they really mean to you. But he really cares for her, and it comes across in his actions. And they end up spending a night together before marriage, which was crazy for the time. And
she's a bad girl.
The next thing you know, she's pregnant, and he's struggling to find ways to pay for it. And her older brother, who's a bastard, calls her a tramp and kicks her out of the house. And Eddie is trying to provide this dream life for her. He shows her this dream house, and it's this really emotional scene and sort of like promises her this home. And they're both like emotionally overcome by the sight of this house. But here's the thing. It's not the premise for me that made this movie special. It's that they are so damn charming and their chemistry is so real and timeless together. I mean, there is a scene when he is trying to get a doctor to cut him a break, basically, on this procedure as she's like getting ready to have a baby. And it's incredibly powerful stuff. This is a guy who says that he has a hard time expressing how he feels about women. He feels kind of lame about like having feelings or whatever. And then he starts weeping and breaking down and saying, I will lay down my life for this girl. And he's going into prize fighting to try to win money for this medical procedure.
So it ends up kind of becoming true that her boyfriend is a prize fighter in the end. We had a very similar theme of kind of the store girl who meets a guy back a few weeks ago with Caught, directed by Max Ophuls, because it's kind of the same setup.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very timely setup for this archetype of woman.
Yeah, and this was a pretty wild movie for its time. The filmmaking, first of all, is great. Like, you really notice when a camera is moving in movies of this era. And I mean, she is talking about being afraid of dying in childbirth. She is questioning wanting this baby. A memo from the Hayes office actually put a damper on this production, saying that it is a sex hygiene picture. And it's a story of a girl who's bad for one night, marries the boy the next day, and then has a baby. And the memo calls the novel that it's based on a nauseating story of doctors, illnesses, cheap and shoddy writing about shoddy people. But they ended up being proven wrong because Frank Borzage, who initially didn't even want to direct this picture, ended up winning Best Director. And Edwin J. Burke won Best Adapted Screenplay for it. So this movie was pretty transgressive for its time, and the performances in it really, really shine.
What about the second movie on the double billing, Remember Last Night, directed by James Whale?
So, the great James Whale, director of Man in the Iron Mask, which is a Video Archive's favorite. And, of course, Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein.
And The Invisible Man and The Old Dark House, etc., etc.
So this might be my favorite movie of the week. Because it's a type of movie that I'm slowly realizing I really love as I get older, and I wish there were more movies like this, and I'm calling that type of movie a big house murder mystery.
Oh, yeah. I love house murder mysteries, too. Like, of course, the one that comes to mind is Clue, but obviously there are lots of predecessors.
There's The House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price. There's even more contemporary ones like Knives Out. But I love that vibe where there's just a bunch of people. One of them in the room is the killer. And this one is based on a novel called The Hangover Murders. And what's hilarious about this is that Whale got Carl Emley Jr. to get the rights to it just so he could avoid directing Dracula's Daughter, because he didn't want to keep doing horror movies, because he had just come off of Bride of Frankenstein. And there's a part in this movie where Constance Cummings is wearing this like swim cap sort of head wrap that makes her look like Gloria Holden in Dracula's Daughter. And she's saying, "Look, I'm Dracula's daughter," before she jumps into a pool. And then later there's a scene where they go into a wine cellar and she says, "I feel kind of like the Bride of Frankenstein." So here's another connection. Whale knew that audiences would go for this sort of thing because the same type of audiences that were into horror movies were into mystery movies. And the way that he knew that is because they were into The Thin Man. I think it all kind of ties together.
It's nice that the first movie of the week and the last movie of the week kind of all have a connection.
The plot of this is basically these New York socialites are celebrating their 6-month wedding anniversary. And that's Robert Young, who we saw in Navy Blue and Gold, and Constance Cummings, and they're hosting this big debaucherous party. And first of all, those two have amazing chemistry. This is like chemistry week. Like all the leads in all these movies play off of each other so well. And like from the first scene, they're doing this like weird sort of like pss, 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 like whistling thing at each other. And then they go to this like nautical themed bar where their friends are just like torturing the bartender, and they're all just drinking so much. And George Meeker's there as this guy Vic, and Sally Eilers plays his wife. And it's this friend group of just like drunk, rich, like jackals, basically. And Robert Armstrong's in this, who's another Video Archive's favorite, of course, from A Most Dangerous Game and King Kong and tons of other movies. So they all go drunk driving to another bar where they chug this like giant bowl of clear liquor, and you're like assuming they're chugging like vodka through straws. And then they start firing like literal cannons, like putting champagne bottles into cannons and like shooting them off into the horizon as there's like boats driving by.
That's very rollerball.
They achieve a level of supernatural drunkenness, like more than anyone could ever drink and not die. And they then lead the cops on a high-speed chase where they kind of drive over a railroad track as a train is coming. Similar to Tragedy at Midnight, which we talked about last week, they all wake up in their mansion and they realize that Vic, Sally Eilers' husband character, is dead in his bed from a gunshot. And Arthur Treacher, who plays Phelps the butler, he's really funny in this. They immediately tell him, like, keep this under wraps, because he comes in with this sort of like, "Good morning, sir," which Robert Young like really mocks him for. And again, it's that thing where it's like rich people having fun solving a murder together. In this case, they more have to solve the murder because they're all kind of like implicated in it. But Edward Arnold shows up. He actually has top billing. He's the detective Danny. And E.E. Clive actually shows up in this briefly as a coroner photographer. That's Bulldog Drummond's butler, Tenny. You can tell this is made by the hand of a real director. There's tons of like moving masters like sweeping through the house, just tons of depth in every frame. At one point, this guy shows up who literally sounds like Dracula and starts hypnotizing them.
I'm gonna guess it's Gustav von Seyfried.
Yeah, he has a very pronounced...
Who was in Son of Frankenstein.
...nose. And he was in Dishonored, which we showed. Yeah. Anyway, even though Sally Eilers is in this movie, it's Constance Cummings and Robert Young and Edward Arnold's movie. And it's funny that in order for things to fall into place, once they like start to solve what's going on, which ends up being like pretty dense and pretty complicated, it's drinking that sort of helps rock their minds into a state where they're able to figure this out. So they just have incredible chemistry. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of twists and turns. It's really funny. And of course, there's like horror, Universal Monsters references. I just think there's a lot of synchronicity on the calendar this week, and I highly recommend Remember Last Night.
I also have to give a shout out to Reginald Denny, who plays Jake Whitridge, because he is in another movie that Quentin actually introduced me to, which is Cat Bayou. It's a really fun female-led Western starring Jane Fonda and Lee Marvin. So if you're interested in that kind of thing and that little bit of crossover, I would recommend to check out that one. Another thing I wanted to highlight about Remember Last Night is look at this poster design, that it's shaped like the martini glass. Like her, she is the stem of the glass, and everyone around her is inside the liquid. It's really, really excellent design because she's basically trying to remember last night and remember everything that went on that led to the death of her husband.
They drink more in this movie than I've ever seen anyone drink. It's borderline Hunter S. Thompson levels of debauchery. It's a pretty funny like opening 15 minutes of them partying.
It's the picture of 1,000 surprises. You'll never forget it. That's this week at the Video Archive Cinema Club. Remember, patrons get this episode one day early for free over at patreon.com/videoarchives. If you'd like to get your tickets to any of these shows, you can do so at
VistaTheaterHollywood.com.
And as always, follow the Cinema Club on Instagram at
Video Archives Club
for updates on showtimes and formats. Okay, guys, that about wraps up the first week of December. I'll see you next week.
See you guys.
This calendar episode was produced by the Video Archives podcast and hosted by Gala Avery and Matt Landsman. Additional audio editing by Eric Clapp. Find even more of Video Archives on our Patreon, patreon.com/videoarchives. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved.